I want to remind everybody that part of the core bargain for the indefinite extension of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty in 1995 was the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. And what we've just heard is that global works, and the treaty hasn't even entered into force. And I was just reflecting on, it couldn't actually work much better. It would just be more stable. It will even work better. So, as a rebuttal to the so-called realists who pose the proposition that global cooperation is only an idealist's dream, what stands before us is a global works evidence. And I personally was very, very impressed by an article that our next speaker penned in the 1990s with Bruce Blair on the weather satellite that went off from Norway that appeared to be a Trident launch for a few minutes to the Russian military hierarchy. And the world hang in the balance. The world hang in the balance. And it turned out that the command and control had not passed on the information with sufficient alacrity and competence. Dr. von Hippel penned that article with real hands-on experience in the national security establishment of the United States, with a real sense of what can be done and what needs to be done. Dr. von Hippel is former Assistant Director for National Security in the White House Office of Science and Technology during the Clinton administration. His areas of policy expertise include nuclear arms control, non-proliferation, energy checks and balances. He is presently a professor of public and international affairs at the Woodrow Wilson School at Princeton, and the co-chair of the International Panel on Fissile Materials. He's written extensively on the technical basis for nuclear arms control and disarmament, future of nuclear energy, and logically, since he tries to do all things good, improved automobile fuel economy. Dr. von Hippel is on the advisory board of the Global Security Institute, where I serve as the president. One of the other programs of the Global Security Institute is Parliamentarians for Nuclear Non-Proliferation and Disarmament, the main organizer of which is Alan Ware, who is here with us today. And it is my hope that the information that we're sharing today will go out to the parliaments of the world to make the argument to parliamentarians that nuclear disarmament is realistic. It can be achieved. The technical capacity to do so is there. The political will needs to be generated. Dr. von Hippel?
Thank you, Jonathan. I'm going to talk about what I consider the common denominator of nuclear disarmament, non-proliferation, and prevention of nuclear terrorism, which is the fissile materials, the highly enriched uranium and plutonium. It's about 2,000 tons of stuff today, and if we got rid of it, we would get rid of these problems. So I'm going to go through what the situation is with regard to these stocks today, the current clean-out initiatives and their limitations, and to the extent that we can't get rid of the material right away, the need to consolidate the material into a smaller number of high-security facilities, and then finally some recommendations for next steps. If we start with highly enriched uranium, it's almost entirely a legacy of the Cold War. And you see that in the fact that the U.S. and Russia have so much of it. And you see the non-nuclear weapon states have a relatively small amount. But even so, the huge scale of the destructive potential in this material, you can see from the fact that this little small bar on labeled NNW over on the right-hand side represents the potential for hundreds of nuclear weapons. You can see also that scale I've shown the 10,000 warhead equivalents. Well, the highly enriched uranium is being reduced. The white at the top of the U.S. and Russian bars is material that has been eliminated. And the green, the next part of the bar down, is a material which is committed to being eliminated. The black on the bottom of those bars is materials which is still available for weapons. There are a couple of other bands, and I point particularly over in the United States bar to a gray band which shows the amount of material which is reserved for future use as naval reactor fuel. The U.S. fuels its aircraft carriers and nuclear submarines with weapons-grade uranium. I'll get back to that. It's easy to get rid of highly enriched uranium. This is the way it's being done in Russia, where more than 1,000 weapon equivalents per year are being eliminated, but only the 500 tons that Russia committed to eliminate will be, in fact, eliminated. The 500 tons worth of highly enriched uranium, it will be that commitment will be fulfilled in 2013. Although there's much more material that could be eliminated both in Russia and the United States. But what you do in Russia is you mix 1 ton of weapons-grade uranium with about 30 tons of slightly enriched uranium to make about 31 tons of low-enriched uranium at an enrichment which is suitable for a power reactor, light water power reactor fuel. And this material, which Russia is down blending and selling to the United States, provides about half of the nuclear electricity in the United States. It fuels that, or about 10% of the total electricity we use in the United States. If Russia and the United States went down to about 5,000 warheads each, they could blend down, by our estimate, about 600 tons more of material, enough for about 24,000 nuclear warheads, by the estimate that we use, which is 25 kilograms of 90% enriched uranium per equivalent warhead. But as much more as has been blended down. Now, there's been a great deal of focus on the highly enriched uranium fueled research reactors. This shows and this is a legacy of Atoms for Peace. And this graph shows the increase in the number of non-weapon states with highly enriched uranium fueled research reactors after President Eisenhower's 1953 Atoms for Peace speech, and then in more recent years, the results of the efforts to convert these reactors to low-enriched uranium, and some of them have been retired. So we're about halfway in eliminating, in cleaning out, if you like, the more than 40 countries which obtained highly enriched uranium through the Atoms for Peace program. So there have been about 200 research reactors which have either been converted or shut down. About 2/3 of those have been shut down. But if you look at the HEU-fueled reactors, you see that that's a very small part of a bigger picture. the focus, there are about 50 reactors left in the category where the focus has been on converting reactors, or if they're ready for retirement, retiring them and cleaning out the HEU. But over to the left, you see that there's about 60 critical assemblies and pulse reactors, some of them with huge inventories of highly enriched uranium, which have not been really addressed at this point. About half of those, more than half of those reactors are actually in Russia. These are reactors with lifetime cores, so they aren't amenable to the strategy of conversion, which has been pursued by research reactors which need to be refueled. One would have to basically, I think in fact most of them could be shut down. The critical assemblies, their job can now be done better with computers, and that seems to be the case, although I don't fully understand it yet, for the pulse reactors. But they have to be addressed. I mean, there's one of the critical assemblies in Russia has tens, maybe 40 bombs worth of highly enriched uranium in the core. And that's true. There's a pulse reactor in Russia which has about 30 bombs worth of highly enriched uranium in the core. These should not be left out of the discussion, but so far they have. Now over on the right, there's another category of about 200 reactors, where highly enriched uranium is used to fuel naval propulsion reactors. The U.S. is the biggest over there, and Russia is a little behind. Actually, the U.S. and the U.K. use weapons-grade uranium, as I mentioned, as fuel. Russia mostly uses medium-enriched uranium, still weapons usable. And India has begun to do that as well with this first reactor. I guess that's in the other category of others. So this needs to be addressed. It's very difficult to address. I've been trying since 1995 to open this issue up in the United States, and I did manage to get the Senate to tell the nuclear navy that they should consider low-enriched uranium seriously for their next generation nuclear propulsion reactors. I then called up the office of the director of the Office of Naval Reactors, and I asked, "Do you know about this language?" He said, "No." "Do you want to know about it?" "No." And it turns out that the Congress is more afraid of the U.S. nuclear Navy than the Navy is of the Congress. But that has to be addressed. And this shows why it has to be addressed. I mean, there are many reasons, but this is one of the reasons. That with U.S. has by itself 130 tons of highly enriched uranium in reserve for future naval reactor use. That's good for more than 60 years supply. Now, what if that? And I include a little bit more for other countries. Probably we don't know how large the reserves are for other countries. But what if we actually succeed or begin to succeed first in deep cuts, reducing the world to 3,000 warheads or 1,000 warheads? Look at what I call this overhang, this huge overhang. If we eliminate all the excess highly enriched uranium for weapons, our inventory of highly enriched uranium would be dominated by these naval stockpiles, equivalent to 8,000 warheads or so. So we really do have to address this as if we are to make progress on nuclear disarmament. I don't think it would be. We would have a stable regime if a couple of countries kept in reserve highly enriched uranium enough to increase the world's stockpile of nuclear weapons several-fold. I'm now running on reserve battery power, so I better hurry up this talk. The plutonium situation is shown here. It's more complicated. We do have a legacy from the Cold War, but that's only about half of the separated plutonium we have in the world. The other half is a legacy of the dream of plutonium breeder reactors. And therefore you see that, in fact, the US and Russia aren't as dominant in this picture. But the plutonium breeder reactors didn't come. When I got involved in this debate in the 1970s, we were predicted to have thousands, maybe about 4,000 gigawatts of breeder reactor capacity today. Well, today we have only 1/10 of that much total nuclear capacity. So we have to get rid of that material as well as the material that was made for nuclear weapons. If you look at the US and Russian bars, the gray material has been declared excess. And none of it has been eliminated yet, but there are preparations to use it for fuel as well. It's more difficult to get rid of than highly enriched uranium. Again, you can see the scale by the 10,000 weapon equivalence bar. The plutonium, separating plutonium for civilian purposes was started to provide startup the fuel for breeder reactors. Those reactors don't exist, and so a couple of countries, France specifically and Japan, has been want to sort of keep separating the reprocessing, keep separating civilian plutonium and using it as a fuel. And this just shows the fuel cycle that they have versus the fuel cycle that most countries have, which is just to store the spent fuel with the plutonium in it. This overhang is a plutonium overhang as well. If we similarly, if we were able to reduce the weapons equivalence, the amount of plutonium available for weapons, that's the red material here, to 3,000 or 1,000 warheads, and we didn't deal with this civilian plutonium, huge quantity of civilian plutonium, we would again have an unstable situation. This civilian plutonium isn't weapons grade, but it is weapons usable. The world has been moving away from reprocessing, civilian reprocessing. Some countries, on the right, you have a column of countries which have never reprocessed. I include the US, which did reprocess for a few years before 1972. We have countries in the middle which have quit. Mostly they were customer countries of France, the UK, and Russia. And then the countries on the right which do reprocess, or a couple of customers, including a couple of customers, Netherlands and Ukraine, which have renewed their contracts, although on a very small scale. The UK has recently decided to get out of the civilian reprocessing business. But we do have, and there's a debate now in Japan, and part of their reconsideration of their policy, nuclear policy following Fukushima. We have still 3 countries which are believe that it will be possible to commercialize breeders. That's Russia, India, and China. Russia and India are convinced. China is thinking about it. So there's still work to be done in the 5 countries which have not yet decided to quit reprocessing. And we do have a debate in the case of South Korea, which wants to begin. It's expensive. The reason countries are quitting is it's so expensive. The Japan Atomic Energy Commission estimated that this one plant at Rokashio, which has been built but which still is not working, if it's operated for the 40 years design life, will increase electrical power costs in Japan by more than $125 billion. That seems like a waste of money that could be used in another way, and that's of course part of the debate in Japan right now. But there is a hardcore nuclear bureaucracy in Japan, which is the only non-weapon state that reprocesses at this time, that they believe that they have to keep going with the policy, otherwise everything will fall apart. Most countries store their spent fuel, and when their pools are full, they go to dry cask storage. This just shows in different countries, U.S. and Germany. U.S. stores the fuel outside. Germany has protective buildings. And then Japan did have a small amount of dry cask storage at Fukushima. Very few people know about it, including the Japanese, because it was essentially zero concern about its safety. On the left side is before the tsunami, and the right side is after the tsunami, with a little seaweed on the casks. With regard to consolidation, U.S. is cleaning out about half of the sites which have fissile material, because it costs $1 billion a year in the U.S. to guard this material, and they want to save that money. And then within the sites, they're consolidating. Here's a huge area which was processing the highly enriched uranium in the U.S., in 4 U.S. nuclear weapons, and then extracting it more recently. And it's being consolidated in these 2 facilities on the top here. All this area, which is essentially, they decided was indefensible, even with spending as much money as they were, maybe $100 million a year at this site. So they're consolidating it into 2 buildings. This is one of the buildings. You can see, as you can see, it's a bunker, basically. And then finally, if my battery lasts, for summary recommendations, which I've already, which I repeat, U.S., UK, Russia, and India, which are countries which use highly enriched uranium for their naval reactors, should design their new naval reactors to use low-enriched uranium. France has already shifted to low-enriched uranium. China, we believe, uses low-enriched uranium. And Brazil, which would be the first non-weapon state to have a nuclear submarine, has decided to use low-enriched uranium. We should address the more than 60 HEU fuel critical impulse reactors. They should they are mostly not required and should be decommissioned. The 5 countries that reprocess power reactor fuel that have not decided to end reprocessing should do so. And the weapon states should declare more HEU and plutonium excess to their military needs and further consolidate the storage and processing of those materials that they keep into very few high security facilities. And then finally, there are copies of the International Panel on Fissile Materials 2011 Global Fissile Material Report in the back there, and our other reports can be found on our website, fissilematerials.org. Thank you.